Hello and welcome to the 6 Leaders of Today podcast with me, Billy Humphreys from MRL Consulting Group. Now, if you don't know, the Leaders of Today podcast is all about championing different leaders within the sectors that we live and breathe. And today, I am delighted to welcome today's guest. We have Alex Wright-Gladstein, the co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer at Ayar Labs. Alex, welcome to today's podcast.
Thanks for having me, Billy.
So before we start, there's no point me giving you an introduction because I will do a terrible job at that. So before we start, we'd like to hand over to our guests to give a very short introduction about themselves. So Alex, over to you.
So I am, like you said, one of the founders and the Chief Strategy Officer at Ayar Labs. At Ayar Labs, we're making computers faster and more energy efficient by using light to move data between chips. And that is going to have a big impact on computing because where Moore's law has made computer processors get exponentially more powerful over time, how we move data between chips has not grown exponentially or kept up. And it's become a serious bottleneck in computer architectures. And so our light-based solution makes it possible to remove that bottleneck and really entirely re-architect computers for this new era of very large data sets, AI, high performance computing, et cetera, and really bring computing to the next level of performance.
So as well as Ayar Labs, these podcasts are all about championing you. So we talk about your career, how you operate, and how you effectively landed where you are at Ayar Labs. But before we start, let's go back to the very, very beginning. So the year is 2004. Scrabble was inducted into the National Toys Hall of Fame. Facebook launched from a very small dorm room, and White Chicks was voted the worst film of the year. And I actually quite liked White Chicks. But as well as all those things, you, Alex, you started at Tufts University in Massachusetts, where you studied economics and political science. So I guess let's start at the beginning, really. What sparked your interest in tech? Because, you're a female working in tech. There's not a lot of you around. So what interested you to get into tech?
I definitely took a roundabout path. Like you said, I majored in political science and economics. For me, my path to tech really came from my passion in preventing climate change. And how did I become passionate about preventing climate change? Let's see, I had a 7th grade teacher who got me really caring about the environment. He was really top-notch, Mr. Otis. He was great. And then, I think the event that really shaped me in my career path was 9/11, and then us going to war in Iraq. And I was relatively young in high school, and I kept hearing that we were going to Iraq for the oil. And I kept wondering, what does that mean? Are we getting more oil now that we're at war in Iraq? I really want to understand more about this oil thing that apparently makes us go to war over it. And so when I arrived at Tufts, I decided to major in political science. That was my first major because I didn't know much about politics at all. And I wanted to understand what was going on with us going to war over oil. And I ended up taking a class that was this kind of year-long, it's called this Ep6 symposium, where we really dove deep on the topic of, the theme for the year was oil and water. And so we learned all about energy, including clean energy. And when I learned about clean energy, it really sparked my interest because I realized this is something where, it addresses the issues of our dependence on oil, which I, was really learning about our dependence on oil at that point. And I thought, wow, you can create win-win situations when you have clean energy. You reduce pollution, you reduce climate change, and you can also create new companies that, get new technologies into the world that can benefit people, that can make people money. You're not, until that point in high school, I had been working on things to, save the rainforest in Costa Rica and Brazil. And it really felt like me fighting against the world. Whereas with clean tech, all of a sudden it was, everyone could win. People could make money while also doing good. And that got me really excited. So that started my interest in clean tech. And from there, it was really just figuring out what's my role within clean tech. How do I push the clean tech revolution forward? And I ended up experimenting with a lot of things, doing internships all over the place. I did an internship in Washington, D.C. I realized I probably wasn't cut out for politics. I decided to add economics as another major. Ended up doing an internship at a venture capital firm called Lux Capital. That is what opened my eyes to entrepreneurship and got me realizing, maybe rather than investing in startups, I think what I would really enjoy doing is creating startups and getting new technologies out into the world. So that was really a formative moment for me.
So you talk about kind of like clean energy. And when you won the prize in 2015 for the MIT Clean Energy Prize, can you explain kind of a bit more about that and how that kind of came to fruition?
Sure. So fast forward, after graduating from college, I worked at a clean tech company for a few years, and then I went to MIT, really as an excuse to, I went to get an MBA, and I wasn't that interested in the skills that I would learn with the MBA. I was really there more because I wanted to get access to engineers and scientists inventing things that could have an impact on preventing climate change. On the other side.
You knew then, for me to create something, I need to get to the engineers to kind of be able to create these products.
Yeah, I think I just realized too late in undergrad that I was really interested in technology. And it was too late for me to then go back and do a major in engineering. So by that point, I decided, hey, if I can't be the person inventing or designing the technology that can address climate change, what I can do is help get that technology out into the world and play a role on the business side of things. And so that's why I decided to work in business for a few years to get some experience on the business side. Sure. And really become more of a business expert. And then, yes, I wanted to meet people who were inventing technologies that could have a big impact. And that's what drew me to MIT.
Right.
And so, and I should mention that I ended up actually learning a lot from the MBA program. It was incredible, and it had a lot of great entrepreneurship classes. But it was also amazing showing up at MIT and realizing there were 300 labs that did energy-related research. And so I got to meet a lot of the folks doing energy research at MIT, and ended up meeting my co-founders. And the MIT Clean Energy Prize was really just a wonderful resource for helping us get to know each other, really, and work as a team in a kind of low-risk environment. So my co-founders were my full-time co-founders were PhD students working on this technology. They were just demonstrating the world's first ever processor to communicate using light. It was the result of this massive research program funded by DARPA, the US Department of Defense Advanced Research Agency. And DARPA had put $20 million into this over the course of 10 years across different programs. It was a collaboration between 3 different universities, MIT, UC Berkeley, and CU Boulder. And so, I got to know a bunch of the folks working across the 3 different labs that were working on this technology. Got very excited about what they were doing and the impact it could have. It was quite different for me. I had been working on energy efficiency and thinking about solar and batteries, and all of a sudden there was this computer chip technology. I knew nothing about the area.
Was that quite daunting?
What?
Was it quite daunting? Yeah.
It was incredibly daunting. And not only was it semiconductor technology, which is complicated, but it was also on top of that a photonic technology, which adds a whole other layer of complexity.
Yeah.
You know, there's a reason people get PhDs in these topics. It takes many years of deep scholarship to really understand the fundamentals. But my co-founders were very kind and spent a lot of time explaining the technology to me, and I found it completely fascinating. And that MIT Clean Energy Prize really gave us a great forum within which to get to know each other and start working together as a team without having to make a commitment up front of, oh, we're starting a company together, which is a big leap of faith to take when you barely know each other.
Sure, yeah.
So, you know, I originally just asked them, hey, should we throw our hat in the ring and just see if we can make it into the semifinals? I think 21 teams were chosen as semifinalists. And I thought, you know, let's just try. You know, all we have to do is submit a PowerPoint and let's see if we can make it. And we ended up making it into the semifinals. And we got assigned 3 mentors we met with weekly. And that's when we started really getting to know each other, working closely together, making sure our pitch deck was top notch. And then we were lucky enough to somehow actually win the grand prize, which was huge. It gave us a lot of visibility. It gave us, I think, faith in ourselves that we could really do this full time. And it gave us the startup capital. So we didn't have to fundraise right away when we graduated. So that was really nice. It took a few months and move out to Silicon Valley, get to know more people in the semiconductor industry before we started fundraising for our seed round.
So you effectively then, from you kind of building the relationships with your team, you kind of then went, you know, well, we can do this. You've kind of, because that could have been, I guess, make or break, because it's no, we don't gel, or we have different opinions, or I don't think I'm going to work with you very well. But there was none of that. You saw the light and went for it.
You know, when I was meeting inventors of different technologies, I had an eye out for people who I thought would be good people I would want to work with. So when I was considering which lab to work with, I wasn't just paying attention to how transformative the technology could be. I was also thinking about, do these seem like good people who I would want to spend a lot of time with?
Yeah.
And so luckily, you know, I was able to find some really top-notch people in this group. And so it wasn't entirely an accident that we got along well. We're able to work together well. It was a little bit by choice and a hunch at the beginning, but then as I got to know them better, it just cemented that admiration for, you know, that they were not only good people, but they had grit. They worked incredibly hard, and they were wonderful co-founders.
As you say, it was your idea to go for the prize. Do you have that kind of competitive edge in you to kind of win?
I guess I do. I must. And especially once we applied, we had to win. You know, I worked incredibly hard to fine tune that pitch, and so, you know, I must have practiced that pitch in front of 50 different people, getting feedback every time and changing it. And, you know, there was $275,000 of free money, you know, at stake. And I thought, hey, if we can get that, that's worth it. So I spent a lot of time making sure that we would do well.
So how was that then, jumping from winning the prize, being at MIT, to then literally going to the Bay, being Silicon Valley, to go, okay, there you go. It's off to you. There you go, guys. It's your call. Let's create. What does that feel like?
You know, I think it was probably quite different for me than it was for my co-founders, because I had spent 2 years in the MBA, literally just, you know, so what an MBA is basically you take these classes where guest speakers come in quite often and talk to your class about their experiences. And since most of the classes I took were focused on entrepreneurship, you know, entrepreneurial sales, entrepreneurial finance, you know, put the category here and just put entrepreneurship in front. And those are all the classes I took. And so that meant every day I was just hearing from entrepreneurs talking about their experiences. And I had 2 years worth of hearing about that. So I had a pretty good idea of what to expect when showing up in Silicon Valley. I had heard lots of people talk about things like, how hard it is to fundraise, people doing 100 pitches before they got, you know, a term sheet. how hard it is to hire. And, everyone's advice was the same, which was be really careful about hiring. Don't just hire quickly for the sake of getting someone in the role. Make sure it's the right person, because firing is much harder than hiring. So you don't want to have to fire if you don't have to.
Sure, yeah.
What else? There was all kinds of advice like that had been really drilled into my head. I'd heard from lots of entrepreneurs who had run out of money, couldn't pay paychecks, for multiple months. And that seemed like a pretty common story I heard from many entrepreneurs. So all of these kind of harrowing tales I was well familiar with, whereas my co-founders had been working on making the world's first processor to communicate using light. They hadn't been, just hearing from entrepreneurs all day long every day. And
it's more you're more that business side, and they were the technical minds.
They were the inventors. They came up with this technology and this amazing breakthrough. And so I think the world of fundraising was probably, a shock and entirely new to them. It was new to me too, and I had a lot to learn, but I just had the context of having heard about it from a lot of people beforehand.
So let's talk about the semiconductor industry then, because obviously it's a long way away from kind of clean energy, I guess, from saving the rainforest to microprocessing and especially photonics and stuff. I guess talking about just women in semiconductors, was it kind of a shock to you in the industry of how little women were actually in the industry?
It was, prior to getting my MBA, I had been in a relatively male-dominated industry of electric utilities and energy efficiency, and going to conferences. Then it was definitely a minority of women, and I was the only woman in my group, in both groups that I was in. Small groups though, and there were plenty of other women around in the companies. And going to the, I always measure by going to the ladies' restroom. To the ladies' restroom, there were other women in the restroom. It was a shock entering the semiconductor industry. The women's restroom was always completely empty at every conference. Women are far and few between, and it was very shocking because I thought I was used to it, but it turned out I wasn't. This was next level.
I think there's been a big shift. I think over the last 2-3 years, I think it's industry-wide that there needs to be more done from kind of a grassroots side to kind of get more young women and girls into kind of tech and into the industry. But what do you think there is a thing that even now why women don't want to work in the industry?
I think it's not so much just that women don't want to work in the industry. I think right now we have a problem of all young people, not really, semiconductor it doesn't seem to be the cool thing for young people to focus on in school. In EECS programs, I think there's much more focus on computer science than electrical engineering. And it makes sense. It's where all the big startups, you want to work at Facebook or Google or, any of the big software startups, you do computer science, not electrical engineering. And so we've noticed it in our hiring as well that, it's important to hire internationally because we just don't have enough talent domestically in the US to be able to only hire people in the US. The programs are just not full enough in the US to be able to populate all the need here. So I think it isn't just women not wanting to do electrical engineering and work in semiconductors so much as it's just not it hasn't been that trendy recently, unfortunately.
I've been saying for about 3 years that there needs to be like some alliance, like the Avengers, basically, and all the semiconductor companies need to come together, no matter of competitors. And it's because, like you said, it's so true. The likes of Facebook, the Amazons, the Netflix, the Googles, they're the companies that grads they just go to because it's it's perception of brand, it's employer branding, it's everything that everyone's talking about at the moment. And I think just the industry is kind of a couple of steps behind that. And obviously a lot of companies are doing a lots of things now. Obviously there's red tape everywhere still where we can't just change branding overnight. And I think being a startup, you have that flexibility to literally go, what do we look like? What do we want to be perceived like? Who are we going to hire? What is our culture going to be like? You kind of have control over all of those different elements to do that.
That's true. Yeah. And then I also think that, I said, I think it's not just women, it's a general, we need more people majoring in electrical engineering going into semiconductor. And I think what you're saying is a great way to encourage that. But I do also think that there is a problem we need to solve with getting women into this industry and into tech in general, which, I've racked my brain about how do we do this for a long time now. And I think it's at all levels or at all age groups, I guess, starting from the youngest. I have a niece who's 10 years old now, and I'm always kind of the techie aunt who's trying to get her into tech. And I remember, some Christmases giving her toys that were, early learn to code type things. And when she was younger, she would say, "Oh, why did you give me a boy's toy?" And it's because all the branding on the toys was, geared at boys. And so she just saw it and she's like, "Oh, that's clearly from the boys section of the toy store, not the girls section. Why did you give me that?" And so I think things as simple as just painting toys pink instead of blue or whatever it is to make girls think that they're for them can make a huge difference. Because I tried to get her into Minecraft and she kind of got into it, but she was like, "Oh, that's the game that all the boys in my class play, but none of the girls do." So it happens at a very young age, I think, and then becomes more cemented over time. And I think just a lot of it has to do with branding and culture.
I was going to ask you, how do you get, like you mentioned when you were a kid, about being young and like saving the rainforest and stuff. How do you, when you're 7 or 8 years old, how do you want to learn how to put things in phones or chips or completely.
How do you spark that curiosity? And there are some very exciting toys and project type things coming out that are pink and branded for girls, which it's sad that that's what we have to do, but I think it is. I don't remember
I think some of it as well is people's backgrounds. I think the way they've been brought up as well, and I think it may be in 20 years time that you don't get brought up where you're a boy, you have to play football or lacrosse, or you have to do that, and you're a girl, you do gymnastics, but maybe in 15, 20 years time, it doesn't matter what you do. So then it could change. But yeah, it's definitely much of a bigger topic than how do you just get, like cybersecurity is a massive one, isn't it? I think cybersecurity and semiconductors are kind of where computer science is, you can fall into, if you're in IT, like if you're older and you kind of want to go, how do I get into that industry? If you work in IT, you've got transferable skills to potentially move into cybersecurity. I guess with semiconductors, it's a good kind of question to lead on to. Being obviously working within semiconductors, and you've mentioned about you had the business head and the other co-founders were the technical minds. How, being in the industry, it's a very technical industry, how were you perceived in that? Obviously being more of the business focus and being a female, how were you kind of taken in the industry, so to speak?
I would say it depends on who I'm speaking with. And it's also evolved over time, and it's also evolved with my own understanding of our technology, which has grown the more that I've worked with it. So I would say there are some people who definitely have taken me less seriously because I'm not the inventor of the technology. I don't have that engineering background. I would say that was especially in fundraising with venture capital investors, that certain venture capital investors, and it's hard to know whether they have those thoughts in their mind that they're judging me because of it, but it generally comes out as they're interrupting me more. They're not letting me get a word in edgewise, and then they're more respectful of my technical co-founder when they're speaking. And then that's when I learned to, I'll let my co-founder just do most of the talking if that's the type of reception we're getting. But that has happened a bit. It's definitely not all venture capital investors. I would say it was actually a minority.
Okay.
I would say that, and when it happened, it was definitely very frustrating. And what I learned in the end was actually it wasn't even worth trying to pursue that investor. I should just focus my energy on the ones that treated me with respect. And those tended to be the ones that would invest anyway. And as far as meeting with customers and meeting with actual other engineers, in the industry and doing business development, it actually, I don't remember it ever being an issue. If we were going to have engineers across the table, I always did make sure to, of course, have engineers on my side of the table as well.
Yeah.
But if I did end up having conversations with engineers, like for example, at conferences, or, maybe I went in for a business meeting and it turned out that an engineer ended up joining and having some questions, I oftentimes actually got the response of, oh, wait, you're not an engineer? You had me fooled. I was sure you were, because I got to the level where I understood our own technology enough that I knew enough to be dangerous, I guess.
I guess you threw yourself into, you kind of, you back yourself, don't you? I think it's, you have to learn the tech. And I think it's when your name's on that, when you're on the lot, what am I trying to say? When your name is there written in that business and you are at the forefront of that, you have to live and breathe kind of the tech, don't you?
Yes, and what I've realized is just because someone has an electrical engineering background or a photonics background doesn't mean that they actually understand how our technology works. The reason that our company is exciting is because our technology is unlike anyone else's technology. So they're really learning, and I shouldn't shy away from just making clear, this is what our technology is, and it is different from what you're familiar with. And it doesn't matter if you have a PhD in electrical engineering, it doesn't mean that you understand how micro rings work, or
Sure.
the thermal tuning of our micro rings and why they work well across a range of temperatures, etc. Those are the types of concepts that that typically people need to be educated on. So I was happy to do that.
You talk about pitches and how you must be very resilient to have, because if every investor you ever went to said yes, it would be fantastic, but there must have been times where it's just getting no, or its timing's wrong.
Yes, I would say the hardest round that we raised was the first one. It was early 2016. We were raising a $2.5 million seed round. And we pitched a lot of folks. And in the world of venture capital, no one ever tells you no, or we don't like what you're pitching. They say, oh, sounds great, and let's keep talking. But then actually getting a term sheet is the hard thing. So it's hard to get feedback on, what do they not like? How do I improve? And it's hard to get to yes. And so yeah, we heard a lot of no's. And we were very excited when Founders Fund, well, actually, so we ended up getting 3 term sheets for that round. Another thing that I learned was once you get 1 term sheet, then that's when other investors start being interested and moving quickly to get you the term sheet. The ones that have been kind of just continuing the conversation casually realize, oh, I better move quickly if I want to get in on this. So we ended up getting 2 quickly following after the first, and got to pick. And we were very happy to partner with Founders Fund, who have been a fantastic partner.
And did you find it difficult in the early, when you went to your first round of funding, where, as you mentioned, it was so different? The product that you have it's unlike really anything else, and you're trying completely different things. So were investors and trying to give you feedback when you were like, well, actually, we do this, we change the product, or because they didn't understand the way of how you guys were thinking?
Yes, all the time. And that was a big learning for that first round, because in that first round of fundraising, I went into each meeting thinking, wow, these investors have so much experience working with startups. They really know what they're talking about. And most investors love giving advice. So we would hear advice with every pitch on, oh, you should be raising more money, or you should be raising less money, or you should be focusing on this, or, really core business model feedback that we thought, oh my gosh, should we be raising more money, or should we be raising less money? And what I realized after a little while was, you know what? No one else has started this company before. I know best how much money we need to raise. And, I know best based on all of the work that we've been doing in this, we know best what the right decisions are. So if we start hearing, the same piece of feedback multiple times, we should take note. But if it's just offhand feedback from someone who's only heard about us for 5 minutes, maybe we don't need to take it as seriously as we've been taking it.
What does it feel like? What is that feeling like where like your first round was like 27 million in venture capital? How does that feel? Like, because you're like, this is us, like we have done this. It's not a team of 50 people. It's like 3 or 4 of us that have just been talking about how passionate we are about this product.
So I won't lie, it feels good. And that was our Series A. Yeah, we raised a Series A a couple years later. That was 24 million. And yes, it feels great. But I have to say, the kind of sad thing about entrepreneurship, at least the way we've done it, is that when you're pitching, at least the way I felt, and I think my co-founders probably too, is we believe so much in our technology. We kind of feel like, of course you should want to put money into this. Why wouldn't you? You'll just be foregoing a lot of money you could be making by not investing in this. So when somebody does give the term sheet and does want to invest, it's kind of like, finally, can't believe they didn't realize that sooner. On to the next thing. Okay, we're kind of very heads down and just very focused on accomplishing the next milestone. So
but you're passionate. It's passionate. I think you have to be passionate about the product, don't you?
Yeah, and it's something that we try to remember to take a step back and celebrate when we do have successes, and appreciate all the wonderful progress we've made, because it is so easy to say like, oh, okay, we raised the money, but now we need to tape out the next chip, or now we need to go hire another 20 people. Let's focus on that. And so we've tried to take a time out and celebrate, and actually we've done a pretty good job of that too, our accomplishments.
What would you say has been kind of like one of the early years kind of challenges that you kind of come across? Obviously there's probably, you could write a book about challenges running a startup, but is there any, if you could start it again or another startup happened, is there things along the lines where you were like, I definitely do this differently?
I'd say probably the biggest challenge in the early days falls into this similar category we've been talking about of, no one's done this before. It was really finding product market fit. We had this chip that could communicate using light, send way more data than any other chip could. But the question was, what do you do with it? And how do you, what product do you create with it? Where does that product fit within the ecosystem? Are we going to make our own supercomputer or AI machine where we're making the processors, we're making, everything and putting together the entire machine? Or are we going to sell optical transceivers, which is a tried and true, well-known product that lots of companies sell? Where do we fit within that ecosystem? And we explored kind of all of the options. And it was tough at the beginning to know what the right decision was, because we got advice on all sides of that spectrum. I'm not sure if we could have done anything differently, because what ended up happening was the industry changed. So when we first started the company, the high performance computing industry was really focused on making a single large chip, a system on a chip that had all the functionality crammed into this one massive thing. And you had these super powerful processors coming out of Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, and then just one large chip. And then a few years in, it started becoming the norm to split that functionality onto multiple what's called chiplets and put chiplets into a package. That didn't exist in 2015 when we started the company, but when it started becoming an industry trend, we realized this is the perfect way for us to fit in, because we don't have to try to either make our own processor and compete with Intel, or try to sell Intel IP to put on their chip, which is very hard to implement, especially with something as different as photonic technology. But we could actually just sell a chiplet and slot it right into the ecosystem that is already emerging and existing. And all of these companies, Intel, NVIDIA, AMD are all, and many others are all moving towards that chiplet approach. So we were very lucky in terms of that timing, that it created this new market that we could fit into with our product.
So when you mentioned about kind of expand, like you say, when the new products come out and the chiplets, and you're ready to expand. When you kind of get to that, is that kind of difficult in terms of, because it's, with the growth, you want to hire quickly and you want to hire, it's kind of giving you keys to somebody else, because it's always been such a tight knit of people that you live and breathe the product. So in terms of hiring the types of people, is that quite hard to find the right people to work with you?
It is hard, and we've been very careful about our hiring. I think because of all that advice that I heard during my MBA of how important hiring is, we took hiring very seriously from day one. And we have a fantastic track record of hiring just wonderful people. These are just, I'm amazed every day at how brilliant the people I work with are across our entire team, and we're over 70 people.
So when I think about Ayar Labs, like we've mentioned, it's new. You've mentioned it's a cool, hip startup company, incredible, groundbreaking product, which has literally changed the way you think about chips and light. What's kind of next? Because you mentioned, and we know the technology is constantly changing. What a chip one day, 3 months later, they're already thinking about the next thing. So how are you kind of evolving with that?
Well, it's exciting. We've already announced one of our partnerships, which is with Intel, where we're enabling some of their products with optical I/O. And we have a few other partnerships with chip makers coming down the line, which I'm very excited about, but I can't talk about yet. And so really it's just focusing on integrating our chiplet with the chiplets of other companies, and making sure that we can enable them with a full product that works reliably at high volumes. So it's pushing along, productizing this technology with our partners. And then at the same time, we're always pushing the forefront with new technology. So we're always doing technology development. Anytime we do a tape out, it has both our product oriented chiplets on it, as well as our experimental devices for the next generation. And even when founding the company, we knew that we had an exciting platform to play with. It wasn't just great for optical I/O and optical communications, but fundamentally, when you start having advanced electronics and advanced photonics on the same chip, it's kind of a whole new playground you can play with in terms of products you can make. So we've always had the plan that once we dominate and there's optical I/O everywhere, what else can we do with this? And I think there are really exciting things we could do in fields like LiDAR and other type, anywhere that you have, that you can use photonics and electronics, and where being able to use the amazing manufacturing ecosystem that is the electronics, semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem to scale up and miniaturize devices is where we can play. So we continue to partner with the universities where that we were founded from, and pay attention to the cutting edge research that they continue to work on, whether it be quantum computing or LiDAR.
That must be great for talent as well, though, from a university side, because you can see the talent coming through, especially, for example, with the Clean Energy Prize. You could, it's to have your foot in the door to see the talent coming through.
That's exactly right. And we have the three PIs, the professors that this technology came out of their labs, are also co-founders. They were part-time co-founders with us. Okay. So they're very much still involved with the company, and it's wonderful for recruiting talent out of the universities as well, like you said.
One thing we talk about on the podcast is like mentorship. And has there been anyone kind of in your career that's really stood out to you as like someone that's mentored you through kind of your career?
There have been a lot of people who have been amazing mentors to me, and so I wish I could name them all, but I think the one who was the most influential to me was actually a family friend that I had in high school, and who actually was a partner at Lux Capital, that venture capital firm where I interned in college. His name was Larry Bach, and he founded, I think, something like 20 companies, all in the field of nanotechnology. I think 14 of them went public. And he was the person who made me realize that being an entrepreneur and being a serial entrepreneur who doesn't just start companies based on an idea that you come up with, but starts companies that bring technologies out of labs and out into the world and makes them useful and accessible by lots of people, that is a career choice, and that's something you can do over and over again. So yeah, Larry Bach has been very inspiring to me, and for me, it's not nanotech, it's climate tech, anything that can prevent climate change.
And like you said, it's a family friend. It's a family friend. It's not a professor or someone at work. It's somewhere where you don't expect there to be a mentor.
Yeah, it's true. And I didn't even really realize what venture capital was or what entrepreneurship was until I kind of learned about what he did. And then he was like, oh, you should, let me get in touch with the folks over at Lex Capital. Maybe they have a spot for an internship available. And that really was very formative for me.
So one thing we like to end on is the advice piece. So what advice would you give to anyone that they might be just like you were at MIT, there might be a group of friends, you have an idea of a product, or you might have that product and you're kind of in your mum's basement somewhere and you've got the idea, you know exactly what it is. What advice would you give to them, knowing kind of what the route kind of in the journey you've been on?
I would say the number one predictor of success in entrepreneurship is how stubborn you are and how much you're willing to stick with it, no matter how many times people say no or it won't work. And it's not just stubbornness of sticking with your idea, but being stubborn that you're not going to give up, but you're willing to pivot, to change a bit, to take advantage of opportunities as they come your way. But I think the most important part of having the right type of stubbornness, I guess, is to have a clear vision of what it is that you want to accomplish, so that you have clarity in terms of, okay, well, can I pivot this one aspect of my company? For us, can I pivot what the business model is that I'm now selling chiplets, as opposed to, having another business model? And, the answer was clearly yes for us, because our goal was to get optical I/O in every computer. And so, to us, what, a specific part of that computer we were in, whether we're making the full computer or not, didn't matter too much to us, as well as
had that one goal.
We had that goal. We were, as long as we could accomplish that, it gave us kind of a North Star to work towards. And, through the tough times, through the highs and the lows of the roller coaster, I think having that clarity of vision helped us to stay focused and excited about what we were doing, regardless of whether we were hearing lots of no's or hearing the yeses along the way.
Nice. Well, Alex, listen, it's been great chatting to you. I think the journey that you guys have been on is been fascinating to watch. I think you mentioned about new things, a partnership with Intel, the new products that you're going to be looking at. I think it's a journey that everyone should definitely keep an eye on. So if you don't already, follow Alex on LinkedIn, follow Ayar Labs on their LinkedIn pages across all the social channels. Alex, it's been fascinating to hear from you. Thank you so much for being today's guest. Have you enjoyed being on the podcast?
Very much. Thanks so much for having me, Billy.
You're absolutely welcome. And so all to our listeners, thank you so much for sticking to the end. Please keep an eye out for our next episode that will be coming very, very soon. Alex, once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Billy.